When the prequels first hit theaters, George Lucas was vilified. Fans said he ruined their childhoods, and his reputation took a beating. But after the sequel trilogy, the conversation has flipped. Now many long for Lucas's touch on Star Wars. Yet what often gets lost is just how much he did for cinema as a whole, from pioneering visual effects, to revolutionizing sound, digital filmmaking, and even computer animation. His fingerprints are all over modern movies in ways most people take for granted. So let's dive in and take a look back at why fans owe George Lucas an apology, not just for Star Wars, but for changing movies forever. Before Star Wars, if you went to the cinema, the sound you heard was radically different from theater to theater. But one thing was the same practically everywhere you went. The sound came out of one channel. And depending on what theater you went to, you might also hear the hum of the air conditioner, traffic passing by outside, and even chatter in the lobby as people grabbed their popcorn. Not exactly an immersive experience. And you can thank George Lucas and Dolby for changing all this. Prior to the release of Star Wars, execs at Fox and Dolby encouraged theater owners across the country to upgrade their speakers for the upcoming release, which would ship with Dolby's revolutionary new stereo soundtrack encoded on the optical print. And for those that saw Star Wars in theaters when it first came out, it was a game changer the moment that mammoth Star Destroyer flew over top of audiences. After Empire came out, Lucas looked to standardize the movie watching experience across the country and formed THX, named after the first feature film he directed. To accomplish this, Lucas sent THX experts to analyze the theater's setup and make recommendations to improve the movie watching experience. And if the theater complied, it could then advertise itself as THX certified. But Lucas didn't stop there. For The Phantom Menace, he wanted to be able to move sound around the audience and throughout the theater, especially during the pod race scene, so you really felt like you were there. Dolby accomplished this by creating 6.1 sound, making The Phantom Menace the first film to have a rear surround channel. By raising the levels of expectations from cinemas, Lucas kickstarted an arms race that continues to this day, as companies like Dolby and DTS work constantly to improve the theater-going experience, as well as the home video experience. When it came time to do the visual effects for the original Star Wars, there was no studio or effects house that could handle what Lucas envisioned. They simply didn't exist, so he built one himself, Industrial Light and Magic. Not only did Lucas have to invent a company from scratch, but he also had to push the creation of entirely new technologies to achieve the kind of dynamic shots he imagined. As Lucas explained, I couldn't just have spaceships moving along the frame. That meant developing motion control cameras, layering multiple optical composites, and finding ways to bring his vision to life using techniques no one had attempted before. By the time he returned for The Empire Strikes Back, Lucas pushed his team even further. He deliberately set the opening battle on the blinding white snow of Hoth, so his artists would be forced to hide the black matte lines around ships and walkers, a flaw that blended into the blackness of space in the first film, but now had to be conquered in plain sight. ILM rose to the challenge, and the result set a new standard for what visual effects could accomplish. In Return of the Jedi, Lucas once again pushed his team to innovate with the thrilling speeder bike chase through the forests of Endor. To achieve the sense of blistering speed, the crew filmed steady camera passes through the forest at a slow pace, and then sped up the footage, creating an intensity that felt unlike anything audiences had seen before. And while Lucas was criticized for repeating another Death Star battle at the film's climax, it also gave him an opportunity to revisit the original's limitations. With years of new techniques developed at ILM, the second Death Star run allowed Lucas and his team to showcase far more dynamic shots, sharper composites, and smoother effects work, essentially giving audiences the battle he had always wanted to make back in 1977, but didn't yet have the tools to pull off. Lucas's push into digital filmmaking actually began years before the prequels. In the 80s, his computer graphics division, known as Pixar, created the first fully computer-generated photorealistic animated character in live action, a knight composed of elements from a stained glass window. Unfortunately for Lucas, not long after, he was forced to sell Pixar to Steve Jobs in the wake of his divorce, a move that kept the company alive, but meant Lucas himself missed out on its later success, as Pixar would go on to make the world's first computer-animated feature film, Toy Story, and pave the way for the rise of computer-animated movies. Still, Lucas continued to experiment. In the early 90s, he used the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles as a testbed for new CGI techniques, like digital set extensions and early CGI, effectively turning the series into a laboratory for innovations he could later scale up for the prequels. In the original trilogy, Lucas leaned heavily on practical effects and puppetry to bring aliens and creatures to life, from Yoda to Jabba the Hutt. While groundbreaking at the time, puppets came with limitations. They could only move so much, required elaborate rigs and teams of puppeteers, and often restricted how a scene could be shot. With The Phantom Menace, Lucas saw the opportunity to move beyond those constraints and push into digital characters. No film had ever featured so many supporting digital characters as The Phantom Menace. Beyond Jar Jar Binks, audiences were introduced to fully CGI creations like Watto, Sebulba, the Gungans, and the legions of battle droids, each integrated into the live-action world in ways that had never been attempted attempted at such scale before. By the time of Attack of the Clones, the leap was even greater, with entire battalions of clone troopers created digitally rather than using costumed extras, while Yoda was replaced with a digital version to allow for greater expression and mobility. This shift to digital characters was a massive leap forward, opening the door for performances that weren't bound by the physical limitations of the puppets, or even the actors. Lucas's push towards digital filmmaking wasn't limited to just characters. He also pioneered the use of expansive digital sets and environments on the prequels. His decision was partly born out of frustration with the unpredictability of on-location shooting. During Episode 4, filming in Tunisia was plagued by brutal weather, and even decades later, a sandstorm on The Phantom Menace destroyed parts of the set and many props. To avoid these headaches, Lucas leaned heavily into green and blue screen technology, giving him complete control over environments that would have been costly or even impossible to build or shoot practically. Entire sequences, such as the gladiatorial battle on Geonosis and Attack of the Clones, were filmed almost entirely against blue screens, with alien arenas and landscapes added in post-production. While this allowed Lucas to create fantastical worlds free from the limitations of weather or geography, it also sparked criticism. Many actors later admitted it was challenging to deliver convincing performances when reacting to environments, creatures, or action that didn't physically exist, a trade-off that highlighted both the groundbreaking ambition and limitations of Lucas's digital revolution. Lucas was one of the first major filmmakers to push Hollywood into the digital era, spearheading the use of digital cameras on Attack of the Clones. Working with Sony and Panavision, Lucas helped design a prototype digital camera to replace traditional 35mm film, making Episode 2 one of the first blockbuster films shot entirely on digital, although there are a couple of quick shots in The Phantom Menace that he shot digitally as a test. The choice wasn't about innovation, it was practical. On The Phantom Menace, every frame of film had to be developed in a lab, scanned to digital for VFX and editing, and then transferred back to film for distribution, a costly and time-consuming process. With digital video, Lucas cut out film processing and scanning entirely, streamlining the visual effects pipeline and giving editors and VFX artists access to dailies within hours instead of days. Not only that, but on set, new high-definition monitors allowed him, his makeup artists, and set decorators to see details instantly, catching mistakes in real time. Additionally, Lucas wanted theaters to switch to digital projectors in order to guarantee that every audience member would see the movie exactly how Lucas intended, unlike a film print that undergoes wear and tear after each screening, developing scratches and fading in quality over time. Lucas's gamble wasn't without growing pains, however, as his digital cameras on clones were so new and experimental that they captured video at just below 1080p and had poor chroma subsampling that frustrated VFX artists when trying to remove green screen, but they paved the way for the industry's shift to digital. Today, nearly every major film is shot this way, with 4K and beyond becoming standard, proving Lucas's risky experiment ultimately reshaped filmmaking into a faster, cheaper, and more flexible process. Beyond his innovations in digital filmmaking, Lucas's influence on cinema and popular culture is staggering. After co-founding American Zoetrope with friend Francis Ford Coppola, the pair helped launch the careers of other future legends, like renowned film editor Walter Murch. Lucas's second feature, American Graffiti, not only became a cultural touchstone, but directly inspired Happy Days, one of television's most beloved sitcoms. Lucas also launched Harrison Ford to stardom with Star Wars, famously casting him while he was working as a carpenter on a door during rehearsals. Together with his friend Steven Spielberg, Lucas effectively invented the modern blockbuster, at a time when 70s cinema was dominated by gritty, downbeat dramas. He also revolutionized Hollywood's business model. During his Star Wars contract negotiations with Fox, Lucas retained merchandising rights the studio dismissed as worthless, rights that would ultimately build a multi-billion-dollar empire and forever change how films are marketed. Beyond Star Wars, Lucas also dreamed up the concept for Indiana Jones, and at one point nearly directed Apocalypse Now, showing just how wide-reaching his imagination and impact truly were. And while fans called for his head after the prequels and celebrated the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney, many now look back on Lucas's time at the helm of Star Wars with nostalgia after the sequel trilogy left them disappointed. The prequels, once ridiculed for their flaws, are increasingly appreciated for their ambition, scope, and willingness to take risks. Lucas always sought to push technology and storytelling into uncharted territory, criticizing The Force Awakens for simply rehashing the past and doing nothing new, after Disney discarded his original outlines for the sequels. Even James Cameron echoed that criticism, noting the sequel trilogy failed to break new ground. In hindsight, fans have come to see that, even if Lucas' experiments weren't perfect, he was always committed to giving audiences something they had never seen before. In the end, Lucas' legacy is not just the galaxy he created, but the way he reshaped filmmaking itself, constantly chasing innovation, risking failure, and proving that cinema's future belongs to those bold enough to imagine something new. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and unmade movies.